After what felt like hours, but was probably just minutes, the doctor said, "He needs fluids, antibiotics, monitoring. He'll stay overnight." Overnight, which meant bills, and bills meant money. Money I didn't have. I felt dizzy. I wasn't sure if I was going to cry, faint, or both, and then the doctor added quietly, "It's already covered." My head snapped up. What? Covered by who? He glanced at the doorway, at him, the CEO, the man who still hadn't said more than 3 words. I stepped outside the room, heart pounding, pulse in my ears. He was leaning against the wall, hands in his pockets, staring at the floor like he was wrestling with something massive inside him. I walked up to him slowly and whispered, "Why? Why would you pay for this? You don't even know me." He lifted his eyes, and there it was again, that flicker of something familiar, something painful, something unspoken. "I do know you," he said finally, his voice low, almost careful. My stomach dropped. "What? What do you mean you know me?" He looked away, like the truth was too heavy to say in one breath. And I swear, for a second he almost looked afraid. Not of me, not of the night. Afraid of something between us. Something he wasn't ready to name. Then he whispered, "You helped me once." My breath caught. "When?" I asked, confused. "I've never met you." He shook his head slowly. "Not like this." For a moment, I just stared at him. "You helped me once." The words echoed in my head, but they didn't make any sense. Would have remembered a man like him, a guy who walked like he owned the ground under his feet, a guy whose voice sounded like he'd swallowed a decade of struggle and turned it into steel. But I'd never seen him before, not once. I wrapped my arms around myself. The hallway felt colder than the night outside. "What are you talking about?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Helped you how?" "I don't..." He cut me off gently, shaking his head. "Not here." His eyes drifted toward the room where my son was resting. "Right now, you need to be with him." The way he said it, calm, certain, like he somehow knew exactly what I needed, made my chest ache. "No," I said softly. "I want to understand. You can't just drop something like that and walk away." He exhaled slowly, like he knew this moment was coming but still wasn't ready for it. "I'm not walking away." Then he paused. "But if I explain everything now, you'll miss something important." "Miss what?" I whispered. He nodded toward the window. I turned. My son was awake. Barely. But his little fingers were curling, searching, waiting for me. My heart twisted. He needed me. More than answers, more than explanations, more than the truth. This man was carrying. I closed my eyes and breathed. Okay, but I wasn't done. I stepped closer to him, close enough to see the faint scar near his jaw, close enough to notice the exhaustion behind his expensive, polished exterior. "Fine," I said quietly. "I'll go to him. But later you tell me everything, no hiding, no disappearing." His eyes locked onto mine, sharp, steady, almost too intense. "I won't disappear," he said. Strangely, I believed him, even though I didn't know who the hell he was. I walked back into the room. The machines beeped softly in the background. My son's breathing was steadier now, still fast, still worrying, but not terrifying the way it was an hour ago. I brushed his hair with trembling fingers. "There you are, buddy," I whispered. "You scared the life out of me." His hand wrapped around my finger, weak, but warm. That tiny grip hit me harder than anything else tonight. And as I sat there, the weight of the day finally crashed over me. I had been holding everything together, with cheap tape and stubbornness, rent.childcare.bills. My job at the grocery store that barely paid enough to keep the lights on. The universe seemed determined to break me one problem at a time, but tonight it felt like everything cracked open at once. The fear, the desperation, the shame of sending that text, that humiliating message to a stranger because I truly had no one else to call. Because when you're a single mom, sometimes pride is a luxury you can't afford. I pressed my forehead against the side of his little bed. Tears slipped out before I could stop. Them. I didn't sob, I didn't shake. The cry wasn't loud, just quiet, aching. Silent tears I'd been holding in for months. "You're okay," I whispered to him again, maybe more to myself. "You're okay. We're okay." And while I sat there, breathing through the fear, a thought flickered through my mind. Who the hell was that man? Why did he stand so close? Why did he look at me like he was remembering something I had forgotten? Why did his voice crack the tiniest bit when he said, "You helped me once"? I tried to piece together the years, old neighbors, co-workers, people I'd crossed paths with, but nothing matched his face. He looked like someone who'd grown up far from poverty, someone who never missed a meal, someone who probably had private tutors and summer houses and everything I never had, so how could I have possibly helped him? The more I thought about it, the less sense it made, and the more my chest tightened with unease. Whatever the truth was, he wasn't just helping out of kindness. His help came with history. While I sat there with my thoughts spiraling, the doctor came in. "Vitals are stabilizing," he said with a small smile. "He's responding to treatment faster than expected." I nodded, relief flooding my whole body. Thank God. Then he added something that made me freeze. "If that man hadn't brought you in when he did, things could have gone very differently." Brought me in? My head snapped up. "What do you mean?" "He didn't bring me. I called a car and..." The doctor frowned. "The nurses said he was the one who carried your son through the doors. And he signed off on the initial authorization before you even stepped inside." I felt the floor tilt under me. "He carried him?" I whispered. "Yes," the doctor said. "Like he'd done it before? Done it before?" The words hit me like a punch. Who was he? Why did he act like this wasn't the first time he'd carried a sick child into a hospital? Why did he look at my son like he mattered? Why did he look at me like I was someone he owed his life to? A chill ran up my spine. My breath caught. Something about this man wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't luck. This was personal. Deeply, painfully personal, and I didn't understand any of it yet. But I would. Oh, I would. The doctor left the room, and suddenly the silence felt heavier, thicker, like the walls themselves were waiting for me to process what I'd just heard. He carried my son inside. He authorized the treatment. He acted like he'd done it before. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady, and stepped into the hallway. He wasn't there. Just white walls, soft footsteps, and the quiet hum of machines behind closed doors. I pressed my hand to my stomach, breathing through the weight settling in my chest. Why did he feel familiar in a way that scared me more than comforted me? Why did his presence feel like a memory I'd somehow lost? Why did every sign point to a connection I still didn't understand? I found him outside, leaning against the far wall near the emergency exit, hands in his pockets, ease lowered, shoulders tense, like he was battling something inside his own chest. Billionaire CEO shouldn't look like that. So human, so breakable. He heard my footsteps before he saw me. When he lifted his head, his expression softened instantly. "Is he okay?" he asked. "He's stable," I said, keeping my voice steady even though everything inside me trembled. "They said you carried him in." He didn't flinch, didn't avoid my eyes, didn't pretend it wasn't true. He just nodded once, quiet, firm. I wasn't going to let anything happen to him. Shiver ran through me. But why? My voice cracked. Why would you do that for someone you don't know? He stepped forward, slow, careful, almost like he was giving me time to recoil if I needed space. "I never said I didn't know you." I swallowed hard. "But I don't know you." He tilted his head, studying me for a long, quiet moment, like he was searching for something familiar in my face, or maybe remembering something painful. "You did once," he said softly. "Even if you didn't realize it." My breath hitched. What does that mean? But instead of answering, He looked down the hallway, like he was lost between two timelines, unsure which one he belonged to. For 2 years, he began, his voice low, controlled. 2 years I've been waiting for a moment like this, a chance to look you in the eyes and finally repay something I've carried on my conscience for too long. Repay? Before I could respond, he lifted his hand, not touching me, just hovering near his chest. Not money, he added. Not a favor. Something deeper. I stared at him, confusion twisting through my chest. I don't understand. You will, he said. Soon. But soon wasn't good enough. Not after everything tonight had thrown at me. I stepped closer, refusing to let him dodge another answer. Tell me the truth, I whispered. Why did you come tonight? Why did you help my son? Why did you say I helped you once? He stared at me for so long I thought he'd never respond. Then, very quietly, he said something that froze me completely. Because I never forgot the nights I watched. You bring food to my door. My lungs emptied. In one sharp breath, the hallway spun. Food to his door. No, that didn't make sense. I hadn't. But then something clicked. A memory, a place, a rundown building with the peeling blue paint, a tiny apartment on the second floor, a single flickering hallway bulb that always buzzed, and a neighbor I barely knew, a quiet young father with tired eyes, a little boy who never smiled, a family that always seemed like they were losing a battle. They didn't have enough strength to fight. A family I brought dinner to, over and over, because I knew what it felt like to go hungry. But that father? He wasn't this man. He wasn't tall. He didn't walk with confidence. He didn't dress like money grew in his pockets. He was skinny, worn, down, exhausted, hungry in spirit and body. No way, you... My voice cracked. Are you telling me that was you? His eyes glistened, not with tears, but with something heavier. Yes, he said quietly. That was me, before everything changed. I staggered back a step. My mind spun like someone had pulled the ground out from beneath me. Because if he was telling the truth, then the man standing in front of me wasn't just a stranger. He was a ghost from a past I didn't know I would ever revisit. And suddenly, the expensive suit, the polished shoes, the guarded look in his eyes, they didn't hide the truth anymore. They only made it more terrifying. I leaned against the cold hallway wall, trying to steady my breathing. It felt like someone had opened a door I didn't remember locking. A door to a life I had pushed so far behind me that it barely felt real anymore. But now here it was, standing 6 feet tall in a tailored suit and staring at me like he knew every version of me I'd ever been. You're lying, I whispered. Not because I truly believed that, but because believing the alternative scared me more. He shook his head slowly. I wish I was. I swallowed, my throat dry. The memory of that old building flashed again, the leaking ceiling, the smell of old carpet, the hollow quiet of nights when even the walls felt hungry. You were so different back then, I murmured. You barely spoke. You could barely stand sometimes. I know. His voice tightened, deeper, rougher. Back then, I was one paycheck away from being on the street with my son. I was exhausted, embarrassed, and I hated being seen. I remembered that look, the way he avoided eye contact when I handed him the meals, how his hands always trembled just a little, how his thank you was always barely above a whisper, like gratitude hurt. But you disappeared, I said. One night I brought dinner and your apartment was empty. I thought, my chest tightened. I thought something bad happened. Something dark crossed his expression, a shadow of memory. Something did, he said, but not the way you think. I stared at him, waiting. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he looked toward the hospital room where my baby slept under warm lights and soft blankets. You saved us, he said quietly. More than you ever knew, more than I ever said, more than I ever repaid. I shook my head, overwhelmed. I just brought food you could have gotten at any shelter. No. His voice sharpened, not angry, but emotional in a way that startled me. You brought food with dignity, with kindness, You didn't make me feel like a failure. You didn't report us to anyone. You didn't treat me like I was invisible. A beat passed. You treated me like a father trying his best. His words sank into my chest, heavy and warm at the same time. I had no idea it mattered that much. I never expected anything in return, I said softly. I know you didn't, he replied, and that's why I never forgot you. A nurse walked by, reminding us to keep our voices down. We stood there in silence until the hallway faded empty again. Finally, I found the courage to ask the question that had been forming since the moment he stepped out of that car. How did you become this? I motioned toward his suit, his posture, the confidence radiating from him like a quiet storm. How did you go from having nothing to this life? He let out a breath, long, heavy, almost tired. That's a long story. I'm not going anywhere, I whispered. He studied my face, maybe checking if I really meant it, maybe wondering if the truth would change something between us. Then he ran a hand through his hair and leaned his back against the wall. After my wife left, he paused, jaw clenching. Everything fell apart. I couldn't find a steady job. Nobody wanted a guy with a toddler and no degree. His eyes dropped to the floor. We spent nights with the lights off so the landlord wouldn't know we couldn't pay the bill. I ate cheap noodles so my son could have the real food. He gave a humorless laugh. And you brought meals that tasted like home. Meals that reminded me what warmth felt like. My heart tightened painfully. Then one night, he continued, I realized I couldn't keep living like that. Not for me, for him. He pointed toward my son's room. For my boy. He pushed off the wall, straightening up. I sold everything we owned, which wasn't much. I found a night shift at a warehouse. I took online classes while my kid slept beside me. Eventually, I built an idea, then a business, and somehow it worked. His voice went soft. And every step of the way when I wanted to quit, I remembered those nights when you knocked on my door with dinner. You didn't know it, but those moments told me I wasn't alone. That maybe I could still become someone. I blinked back tears. And now you're a CEO, I said, barely above a whisper. He gave a small nod. It doesn't feel real most days. His eyes warmed. But tonight, helping your son, it felt like my past finally caught up to my present in the right way. I stepped closer, emotions swirling too fast to control. So all this time, you remembered me? He looked at me like the answer had been carved into him for years. I remembered everything. A slow ache spread through my chest. But why show up now? I asked. Why tonight? Why this moment? He hesitated. The kind of hesitation that hid something deeper, something heavier, something he wasn't ready to say. Finally, he whispered, because this isn't the first time your name has crossed my path. My breath caught. What does that mean? His eyes held mine. Steady, intense, almost frighteningly gentle. You're more connected to my life than you think. And after tonight, I can't keep pretending it's a coincidence. The hallway suddenly felt smaller, like the walls had crept a little closer, like the air had thickened just enough to make every breath feel heavier. What do you mean my name has crossed your path? I asked again, softer this time. He didn't look away, not even for a second. It's complicated, he said. I crossed my arms, partly to steady myself, partly because I wasn't ready for another shock. I have time. He let out a breath, one of those long ones people take when they're searching for the version of the truth that hurts the least. You remember that old neighborhood? He finally said. The building we lived in? The one falling apart? I nodded. Of course I remembered. I remembered every cracked tile, every dripping pipe, every thin wall that carried arguments from one family to the next. That place wasn't just a home. It was the battlefield of our worst days. Well, he said, when I finally got my company off the ground, I made a promise to myself. I'd go back. I'd help some of the families still stuck there. My eyebrows lifted. That's thoughtful. That's not the complicated part, he said. I felt my stomach tighten. He continued, voice lower now. When I went back, You weren't there. I moved, I said. Obviously, I know. But that wasn't the weird part. A strange chill crawled down my spine. He reached into his coat pocket like he was about to pull out a truth I wasn't ready for, then stopped, hand resting on the fabric, frozen. I found something, he said quietly. Something you left behind, my breath caught. What was it? He hesitated. A note, he said finally. A tiny one. Stuck behind a loose floorboard. It had your name on it. I frowned, confused. A note? I never wrote a note. His eyes softened. I know. It wasn't your handwriting. A cold wave rushed through me. Then who's... Your son's father, he said gently. Everything inside me went still. The hospital sounds faded. The beeping machines, the rolling carts, the murmurs, all of it vanished beneath the sudden rush of blood in my ears. My son's father? I whispered. He nodded slowly. There was a message on it, he said. Short, strange, almost like a warning. I felt my heartbeat slam against my ribs. What did it say? He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice like the words weren't meant for anyone else to hear. It said, if anything happens to me, find her, help her. She's the only good thing I ever had. My eyes stung instantly. No, I breathed. No, that can't be. He left us. He didn't care. He did. The CEO whispered. I shook my head harder. That doesn't make sense. Why would he write that? Why hide it? Why would you find it? Because, he said. I bought the building. I blinked. You bought it? He nodded. I was going to tear it down, turn it into something better. But before starting construction, I ordered a full interior check. That's when one of my workers found the note hidden in the floorboard under your old unit. My legs felt weak. So you read it. And then what? I asked the landlord if he remembered you, he said. And he told me everything he knew. Your move out, your situation, your pregnancy, your job, your struggles. A flush of embarrassment and anger burned under my skin. He had no right. I know, he said quickly. I wasn't asking because I was judging you. He paused. I was asking because the father of your child asked me to protect you. And I didn't know why. My throat tightened painfully. So you've been, what, keeping tabs on me? No, he said firmly. But after the note, I couldn't forget your name. I couldn't ignore it. Something about it kept bothering me. I swallowed hard. And tonight? He took a slow breath. Tonight your message popped up on a phone I almost never check. The same phone I used back when I was broke. The same phone number that man used to call me from. My jaw dropped. You knew him? I whispered. He nodded. Once, slowly, like the truth weighed too much to move quickly. We worked the same warehouse shift for almost 3 months, he said. He helped me once when I passed out from exhaustion. And I helped him on nights when he couldn't stop shaking. My chest tightened. You knew him, I repeated. Barely audible, I did. His voice cracked. Just slightly. And he told me one thing that stuck with me, something I never understood until tonight. I stared at him, barely breathing. What did he say? He looked directly into my eyes. He said, if anything ever happens to me, take care of her. She saved me before anyone else ever did. The world tilted, just enough to make me reach for the wall. I don't understand, I whispered. You will, he said gently. And I promise you, everything is connected. His eyes flicked toward the room where my baby slept. More than you know. I don't know how long I stood there, pressed against the cold hallway wall, trying to piece together a truth that didn't feel real. Everything he'd said, the note, the connection, the promise, it all circled around me like smoke. Impossible to hold, impossible to ignore. Finally, I found my voice. Why didn't you tell me any of this earlier? I asked, quieter than I meant to. He didn't hesitate. Because I didn't want to walk into your life with a story that didn't belong to me, he said. And honestly, I didn't know how you'd react. I didn't want to drag up someone you were trying to move past. I hated that he was right. My son's father was the one name I never said out loud. Not even in empty rooms. It was a wound I'd learned to hide. like a bruise under a long shirt. Out of sight, out of mind, until someone brushed against it and the ache reminded you it never healed. I took a shaky breath. So you kept that note all this time? He reached into his coat again, slower this time, and pulled out a small, folded piece of worn paper. Not just worn, softened, creased, held, like someone had touched it more than they should have, reading it until the edges curled the way memories do when we replay them too many times. He held it out to me. I wasn't sure if I should give it back, he said, but tonight, I think you deserve to see it. My fingers trembled as I took it. It felt lighter than I expected, almost weightless, but the words inside carried the heaviness of years I thought I'd buried. The handwriting hit me. First, slanted, messy, rushed, like someone writing in the dark or in fear, or in goodbye. I forced myself to read the lines. If anything happens to me, find her. Help her. She's the only good thing I ever had. My vision blurred instantly. The letters swam, the words twisted. Everything inside me cracked at once. Anger, grief, disbelief, all the pieces I'd locked away behind pride and survival. I swallowed.
Hart, he wrote this?
My voice broke. For me? The CEO nodded. I think he wanted you to be okay, even if he couldn't stay. I closed my eyes, letting a tear slip before I could stop it. He left us, I whispered. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't explain. He just disappeared. The CEO's jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, but in something like regret. He didn't disappear, he said softly. Something happened, something that wasn't his choice. My eyes shot open. What are you talking about? He hesitated, just long enough for fear to slip into my lungs. I shouldn't say more until we're somewhere private, he said. This hallway, it isn't the place. What aren't you telling me? I pressed, voice sharpening. He didn't flinch. Something that changes everything you think you know about him. My heart hammered. I don't understand. You will, he said, and his voice dropped lower, steadier. But not here, and not tonight. Right now, your son needs you. I looked back at the room, at the small shape under the blanket, at the soft breathing that proved he was safe, alive. Here, my voice came out barely audible. Why did you come tonight? I whispered. Really? He didn't blink. Because you asked for help, he said, and I made a promise, even before I knew who you were. My throat tightened. So this wasn't charity? Or pity? Or guilt? He shook his head. No, this was loyalty, he said. To him, and now, maybe to you. I didn't know what to say. My mind was a storm, a mess of emotions pulling me in opposite directions. Gratitude, confusion, anger, curiosity, and beneath it all, a strange, aching sense of recognition, like fate had been circling us for years, waiting for the right night to finally press us into the same hallway. He took a slow breath and looked at the door again. I'll pay for everything tonight, he said, no matter what he needs, no matter the cost. I blinked hard. But I don't understand why you're doing all this for us. A shade of something unreadable crossed his face. Not pain, not sadness, something deeper. He stepped closer, just enough for me to hear him clearly. Because, he said, your son isn't the only life you saved. My breath caught. What does that mean? His gaze softened, painfully soft. It means you don't remember me, he whispered. But I remember you. The hallway spun just slightly, like the truth had cracked the ground beneath us. Remember me from where? I whispered. He gave the smallest, saddest smile. From the nights you used to leave food outside my door. When I was too broke to buy dinner. My mouth fell open. My legs nearly buckled. That was you? I breathed, he nodded. For months, he said. Every night. You kept my family alive. You thought no one knew. But I knew, and I never forgot. The air left my lungs. I'd saved him. And tonight, he'd saved me. For a moment, everything around us faded. The buzzing hospital lights, The muffled beeping of monitors, the nurse's footsteps, the cold smell of antiseptic. All I could hear was my heartbeat, heavy and uneven. Like it was trying to make sense of something my mind couldn't process fast enough. "You," I whispered, pointing at him as if I needed confirmation from my own hand. "You were the one living in 3C? The guy who barely opened the door? The one with—" He finished for me, voice calm but tight. "The 2 kids," he said. "Yeah, that was me." My breath hitched. I hadn't seen his face back then, just shadows through a cracked door, tired voices and hungry little whispers thanking someone they never met. "But you never said anything," I said. "You never even—" looked at me. He shook his head gently. "I was ashamed," he admitted. "I couldn't afford groceries. Couldn't pay all the bills. Sometimes I didn't know if the heat would stay on." A small, painful exhale left him. "You showed up every night with a meal. You didn't ask for explanations. You didn't stare. You didn't make me feel like a failure in front of my kids. You just helped." I swallowed a wave of emotion that hit so hard it almost hurt. "I didn't do it for recognition," I said quietly. "I did it because nobody deserves to watch their kids go hungry." "I know," he murmured. "That's exactly why I never forgot." Something shifted in his expression then. Not gratitude, not nostalgia. Something deeper. Something that felt like a quiet, unfinished story. He looked down the hallway again, scanning it as if he were checking for witnesses or memories. Then he leaned his shoulder against the wall, his voice dropping lower. "I wasn't supposed to make it out of that neighborhood," he said. "People like us. We're not the ones who turn into CEOs. We're the ones who work overtime and still fall short. But you did make it," I whispered. "You climbed out. You built everything you have." A humorless smile touched his lips. "Everyone sees the success," he said. "Nobody sees the nights I slept in my car outside night school. Or the days I skipped meals so my kids could have seconds. Or the mornings I walked into work pretending everything was fine because I couldn't afford to let anyone know it wasn't." I felt something warm and painful twist inside me. Empathy. Admiration, maybe both. "I had no idea," I said softly. "You weren't supposed to," he replied. "You had your own battles. You were raising your son alone, working double shifts, struggling just as much. And still, you helped me." His eyes lifted to mine. "That's why tonight, when I got your message, even before I realized who it was, I didn't hesitate. I remembered what it felt like to be desperate with a sick kid and no money. I remembered what it felt like to need help and pray someone cared enough to answer." My throat tightened so sharply it hurt. I whispered, "But why now? Why come back into my life after all this time?" He hesitated, not because he didn't know the answer, but because he wasn't sure how much to reveal yet. Finally, he said, "Because fate doesn't knock twice," he murmured. "And when it knocks like this, in the middle of the night, with a child's life on the line, you don't ignore it." He pushed off the wall gently, straightening his coat. "And because whether you believe it or not, you changed the course of my life, and I'm not the kind of man who forgets a debt like that." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My chest was too full, of disbelief, of gratitude, of confusion, of something that felt dangerously like hope. Before I could respond, a nurse stepped into the hallway. "Ma'am," she said, smiling lightly. "Your son is waking up. He's asking for you." I froze, the world narrowing to a single moment of relief and fear. "He's awake?" I asked, almost breathless. "Yes. He's still weak but stable. You can go in." I nodded quickly, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. But as I turned toward the room, the CEO spoke again, softly, deliberately. "When you're ready," he said, "I'll tell you the truth about what happened to your son's father." My hand froze on the door. A chill spread across my skin.